So, welcome to our new podcast or pod, We Brothers. I'm Sean Jacobs.
I'm David Jacobs, the younger
And,
brother.
and as the title says, We Brothers. David's based in South Africa. I'm in the US. We're about 10 years apart. As you can see, I have all the gray hairs. David did that Cape Town thing. It got rid of all the beard and the hair.
I thought for the first show at least look a bit neat, like hoe sê hulle is bokvel.
Squint something. Okay. So the last time we actually lived in the same city was 24 years ago. And the point of the show is to kind of take this idea, like we brothers. We always, whenever I visit South Africa, David's also been to New York. We've traveled to some other places together. When we kind of get together, we talk about a lot of stuff. And I felt maybe it's time that we should, because we live on a different side of the world. In fact, I looked today, it's about 12,550 kilometers if you fly.
Yeah.
And so that connection as brothers and the fact that we're living in different parts of the world, that's behind this idea of partying. We don't want to get too serious, but we want to unpack, discuss, share developments in both our societies. And for the best, we're going to dive into news stories, like share some of our personal obsessions, talk about politics, culture, sports, economics. Sometimes we'll answer like we'll act like we're doing an FAQ, like a frequently asked questions. So we'll answer a question. If I don't know, what does Goomba mean? I mean, we're not going to do that today. Other times, we'll take a deeper analytical approach to something. We'll try to explain it, understand it, we have different viewpoints on these things.
I just wanted to say now, we have very, very different viewpoints. We can agree on a lot of things, but I think what bodes well is the fact that we never get upset. Like we'll get heated. There'll be a little bit of oomph behind.
There's not going to be a lot of heat on the show.
But there will be no punches thrown. So luckily we're too far apart for anything like that. But yeah,
I'd never actually. I don't think I ever fought with you. Have I physically?
No. I think we've always had a relationship where you kind of understood that if you ever throw hands at me, I'll probably throw back. But maybe when I was a bit smaller.
Why am I fighting with a 10-year-old when I'm like literally like an adult? No.
That would be a little weird.
There's no fights here. Anyway, so we'll bring this kind of our experiences, like reading, travel, schooling, work. Like we work in very different ways. Like David's done some, like David actually served more recently. You were like a supervisor, manager of some type.
At a printing company in Cape Town. It was a good experience. But I just thought
we're gonna get into that. This is something we also want to talk about in the show about working in South Africa, because I worked in South Africa right out of university. I worked in South Africa. When I did work when I was in high school a little bit, and in university I worked like part-time jobs. Some of them was actually manual labor, and it's very much related to like how racial politics work in South Africa. But we'll save some of these conversations for going ahead.
The idea is that we kind of crisscross over a lot of topics, so that because we know there's a lot of people that have different viewpoints and understand, and some people will probably agree with me, and some people will agree with you, and some people will probably say we're both saying stuff that they wouldn't agree with. But that's the beauty of having these conversations.
It sounds a lot like your facts and my facts, but we're gonna one of the things I want to do as we keep going is we want to do a fact check. We may have to get an intern, somebody who's with us, a producer on the show, whose job it is to fact check us, so that we don't say a bunch of nonsense, acting like it's facts. So we're gonna debate, but there's gonna be facts.
Hopefully it's a good debate, and obviously if it comes to a certain point where we've got some viewers that want to give us their take on something, we might even go back in the next show and say, we've got a question from this one, and if we can answer it or whatever, then hopefully we can give back in that way as well.
Once we build up a big enough audience that we can take, ask people to send in their questions, we'll try and answer them. I don't think I want to become like an advisor over your personal life. I think it's more like, hey, what do you make of this political thing or this political figure? Or
send us ideas. Yeah, send us ideas.
send us ideas of things to talk about. Yeah. So for now, we're committed to recording and publishing like one episode every other week, so every fortnight. And then as we keep going, eventually we might produce more episodes. But I think it's important. I mean, we said we'll say a lot more about our lives, how we grow up. This will emerge as we keep going, and we'll use some of that when we discuss topics. But I think it's useful for people to know, like, where do we live? Like, if we could say, like, where are we kind of talking from? And I'm going to let you start. If you could say, where do you live in Cape Town? What's it like? And I think maybe if you can, as part of it, say something about the history of that place where you are, who lives there, or maybe some other things that are interesting about it. And then after you, I can say a little bit about Brooklyn. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I live in a suburb called Goodwood in Cape Town. Very beautiful suburb, very diverse, nice group of people, a mixed group of people. It was established in 1905, and it was generally for the rail workers. But fun fact is,
for white
rail workers. But fun fact is,
you're afraid to say race now.
No, we're not afraid to say race. We can go anywhere. I'm easy. But yeah, fun fact is that it was actually named after a famous racecourse in England.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that was kind of the idea as well. They wanted to do a racecourse in Goodwood as well, but that never materialized. Unfortunately, they wanted like a world-class standard racecourse, but that never materialized. But yeah, I get to enjoy a beautiful view from my place. I can see, if I just look out now, my windows, the curtains are open, so I can see Cape Town Stadium, Table Mountain. I can see Milnerton. I get to see the water, so it's beautiful over here. And some people have taken on generations here already. So that's why I'm saying it's a vibrant mix of cultures. So it's actually beautiful to stay here, So yeah,
I'm gonna remind people always of the ugly stuff. So actually, next to Goodwood was a place called Windermere, which was a place where Black people lived, mostly what in South Africa people might call Africans, people who speak an African language. Cape Town, we'll get into this over time. Cape Town is quite segregated, probably the most segregated city in South Africa, quite divided. And that part where David lives, as I said, it was designated after the Group Areas Act in the 1950s as a white area. And there were next to it, there was with the army bases, there used to be like a neighborhood called Windermere, which was a mixed colored African neighborhood. All the Africans were moved to Gugulethu, to Nyangalanga. And then the colored people, they were moved to like Fracterton, Kensington, or they ended up in the other colored townships, which are sort of satellites, because Belleville is the sort of major business part of that part of the city is Belleville. And then there's these like suburbs, former white suburbs, colored townships, and African townships. We'll explain all these confusing South African terms later on. But yeah, it's a very interesting place now. There's a lot more immigrants living there, from people from the rest of Africa who've been there now for probably 2 generations, right?
Yeah. So when I say a vibrant mix of cultures, I'm not just talking about people who are born in South Africa. I'm talking about Africa as a whole. So yeah, we've got. I go to gym with people from Congo, Nigeria, and I get to share some of that story. So it's beautiful. Yeah.
Is there any famous people who are from Goodwood that you could look up when you were looking up to see notable Goodwood people?
Let me just double check.
Yeah, let me check too.
Let me double check on that, because your Kuilsrivier and your Kraaifontein. There's still an argument about Eben Etzebeth and whether he's from Goodwood or somewhere else. So I think we'll claim him as a person that comes from
like Reiterweg or Pero or something.
Yeah, probably Reiterweg. But yeah,
even Etzebeth, for people who don't know South Africa, and that means you're living under like Susanna said, on a clip, you're living under a rock. is even Etzebeth is like probably it's like one of South Africa's best all-time rugby players. Plays at the lock, forward. We'll say something about him later on. I think he's going to come up in conversation later on. But yeah, famous rugby player from Cape Town. So I think that's what David's talking about. Okay, so me, I mean, before I was trying to like see if David could find any interesting people from Goodwood. So I live in Brooklyn, New York. In advertising, they'll say like, well, I actually live in Fort Greene, which is a neighborhood in Brooklyn in New York City. So New York City has like 5 boroughs. This is the boring stuff. Staten Island, which is sort of separate and weird, mostly white, votes Republican, kind of suburban. Then there's Queens, which is some of the elements of Staten Island, but it's actually the most diverse in New York City. Lots of people from Central and South America, from the Caribbean. And then there's, of course, Manhattan, which is where rich people live. Well, the most of the rich are in like the lower part of Manhattan, and then part of the upper, what they call the Upper East and West Side. And then there's Brooklyn. Oh, there's also the Bronx. The Bronx is above Manhattan, and then there's Brooklyn, which is to the southwest, kind of below Queens, and to the east of Manhattan. It's separated by a river called the East River. And Fort Greene is a neighborhood like right near the bottom, which you have like 2 stops on the subway, and 1 stop you're at Canal Street, 2 stops you're at Union Square, etc., etc. It has a very rich and interesting history. Originally, it was a fort, like a military fort, like Cape Town. Big Cape Town was a fort for the Dutch, and it was used during the Revolutionary War of 1812. This is the war between the British and white American settlers who were demanding their own independence. And so in that war, this is when there was a fort. There was a general. His name was General Nathaniel Greene, and then this place is named after him. Initially after the war, once they had sort of established a place where people can live, it was like a vacation home for rich people. There's still houses here that are these big stately houses where you could see rich people would come and have like their summer holiday from Manhattan. And then it kind of grew into like a neighborhood of, various sets of immigrant communities, Jews, Polish, African Americans, probably the most recent ones, very heavily African American neighborhood, black neighborhood. When I arrived in the neighborhood in the early 2000s, it was a predominantly majority black neighborhood. And the part I also live in is kind of famous for, it's a historical district. It has these multi-story houses, which kind of looks like masonettes in Cape Town, but more floors, like maybe like 2 or 3 more floors, and they call brownstones. And then there's in the neighborhood where I kind of like close to where I live is a beautiful park. David's been there. It's called Fort Greene Park. That park was established after the end of the war. And then just one other quick last factoid about Fort Greene is that this is why I was like trying to poke David by saying name any famous people who's lived in Goodwood. Maybe next week he'll come back. He'll
come up with something. I mean, I have to.
And they have Zora Neale Hurston, who's a very well-known American writer who documented like the lives of poor black people in the South in books. Spike Lee, the director, I'll say something about him again in a minute. Mos Def, I've seen Mos Def around here, like walking on the street. Chris Rock lived here for a while. There's a beautiful film called Brooklyn Bohem. It's a documentary about a lot of these interesting black artists and creators who lived here in the late 90s, like roughly like just after, I would say till about 2 or 3 years after September 11. Erykah Badu, Palmer. I've actually seen Robert De Niro in the neighborhood, but in an adjacent neighborhood, not in my. I actually went to school that Rosie used to. My daughter went to like an elementary school, and Robert De Niro's kids were in that school. And just one last thing, it's also been a place where they've shot a lot of film. So if you've seen Mo Better Blues, which is a Spike Lee film, She's Gotta Have It, both the film and the TV series. I'm thinking of one other film. Oh yeah, people also say, like, I was looking up earlier today, Dave Chappelle's Block Party. You know, the film where he threw this like party. It's like a musical concert. They often say that was filmed here, but it wasn't really filmed here. It's filmed
on the set or something.
Well, no, it's in a street. It was like a dead end street, but it's about maybe on the edge of Fort Greene, more to what's called Clinton Hill, which is the next neighborhood. But yeah, it's a very interesting place. It's been gentrified. We need to talk about gentrification at some point. Gentrification just means that the original residents get moved out and people with money come in, buy buildings. So if you come here now, it's really expensive restaurants. It's not a place to be poor. So you find that people can't rent here. The only people who can rent here are, I would say, rich and most likely white. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just another thing on the brownstones. I think it's an iconic image, and I think if people watch any music videos or whatever, they would understand what a brownstone is, because it's quite well known. So yeah. But yeah, I think we need to head into our first topic.
So I'll introduce the first topic, and then I want to hear your views, and we'll see how we go. So our first thing I think we should talk about, and I'll put this on the in the chat, is we want to talk about Cape Town. We may as well start with Cape Town, the city where we're from. Where David still lives, was just voted the best city in the world by Time Out magazine. And they said it was based on a survey, and I'll put survey in quotes already.
Yeah.
Over 18,000 people, in which the city was judged on its beauty. For its beauty, it's like all the kind of food you can eat there. And what I saw the phrase feel good vibes. Last year it was second. They also mentioned that it has a rich history, diverse culture. And another aspect that was mentioned was if the city is safe and walkable. And just for contrast, other cities in the rankings were Bangkok, New York. So Bangkok was second, New York was third, Melbourne in Australia was fourth, and then London was fifth. And before I asked David his opinion about this survey, because I want to hear David's civic pride or his city pride, Cape Town's mayor declared it as on his IG, he was going on about it. Gordon Hill Lewis, sorry.
Yeah.
And he went on, but I saw one funny thing is I saw that if you try to comment on it, it says comments on this post have been limited. And I say that because I did see that there were other parts of the internet where people did question, like, what does it mean to say that Cape Town is the best city in the world when not all these people live? Anyway, exactly. I'll stop there and let you go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to start. You cannot talk about Cape Town and forget the history of Cape Town. People who were unprivileged because of race. They were thrown to one or to certain parts of Cape Town, and through lack of generational wealth, obviously they're still living in set conditions. So with that being said, yes, it's beautiful. You when you come back from another country and you fly over and you land in Cape Town, you feel like you're home. So I'm always going to have that feeling of Cape Town. It has a certain element, but I think mostly I would say the people. I think if you ask anybody from around the world who's willing to laugh at themselves the most, it will probably be Cape Townians. Like we don't take a lot of things seriously, and I mean that in the best way possible. We can be disciplined, we can do a lot of things, but people will generally say Cape Town people are laid back. The people from Gauteng, Durban, they would tell you they've got this straight-laced thing where they want to work. It's hustle and bustle, but people in Cape Town tend to enjoy life a bit more than people in the rest of South Africa. But once again, I would say you cannot forget that we have an issue in Cape Town with gangsterism, with crime, all those things. But yes, it's a beautiful place, and I understand they voted as such. I would also like to see who was involved in the survey. But yeah, if you're gonna take a win, I'll probably take that win. But there's a lot to be that we still need to do for us to feel like it's the best city in the world.
So okay, I'm gonna give some love first, and then I'm gonna hate. So firstly, it is an incredible place, natural beauty, like you can't like it's an unmistakable place with like the mountain. It has incredible beaches. Like I mean, if I go to Cape Town and I visit, like I was just there in the middle of January, and obviously, yeah, I was happy to be there. It relative to other South African cities, it is easy to get around in it. You can still actually walk in its downtown, which is really vibrant during the day, and not just like in other cities where maybe in its downtowns, sort of central part of the city, there's mostly poor working class people, and there's a sort of resegregation in which those people are mostly black, so white people don't venture down there. So you could say, yeah, look, if you're in like downtown Cape Town, if you at the waterfront, which is this like private shopping mall, but that presents or acts like a public space, then if you operate just in like central Cape Town, the mountain, and the rich area on what's called the Atlantic seaboard, plus the waterfront, I would vote. I could also vote, and the suburbs that go around the mountain from the city out to Simon's Town. I can also, if I had a vote, I would also say that's an incredible city. Like they make sure that there's a train that runs on the line that drops you off at the beaches. There's these beautiful little towns where you can eat fresh bread at like a cafe. I mean, there's the houses that you can rent. So yes, I think a lot of the barbs, like people who've complained, said, look, what you're showing people is essentially the best city in the world is essentially what you might literally call the white city, the part of the white part of Cape Town. It's a city that you present to tourists. But once you step out of that part of the city, and I had this friend who he would do these tours for visiting students where he would gather you at Cape Town Station, and he did it with me and some students from where I teach at the new school, and he's made us face, like if you stand in the station and you face Adderley and Strand and the buildings, and he said, this is the Cape Town that everybody talks about now. He said, turn around, you see the station behind me? 70% or 80% of the people who live in the city, they have to come either with the minibus taxis or they come with the train. They come for work, they come to enjoy the waterfront or, whatever. So that part of Cape Town is not the best city in the world.
Yeah.
As you described, that's where they forcefully move people to. And that's the place with like substandard services, extreme violence. And again, this is not to say the people there are violent. We're not saying that we grew up there. I grew up in Archery. Yeah. We grew up in Archery. We grew up with people using mandrakes outside our fans, gang fights. Yeah. I mean, we can go on. We'll unpack this as we go with the show.
On the later stage, yeah.
Yeah, we will even, I think at some point we should rewatch old documentaries and talk about them, like Cape of Fear. But anyway, my point is that other Cape Town, I think is not the one that's winning awards. And that's for me, that's the dirty secret of Cape Town. The Cape Town always gets painted as, oh, it's so well governed. It's the best city in South Africa. And I think that's why the mayor of Cape Town on his IG page has to put comments on this post to be limited, because once you go beyond that, then it's a city of, what do you call those, hitmen, murder for hire, turf gangs, drugs. I mean, that's poverty, overcrowded housing, people living in squatter shacks. Like that's another Cape Town that I don't want to talk about. And let me just say one other quick thing, because you brought up Johannesburg. I've also had I've had the privilege recently, whenever I go to South Africa, is that I always sometimes make a pit stop in Johannesburg, or in November, actually, I just went to Joburg from New York. I don't know. I like Johannesburg as a place for its people. I think it's way more vibrant than Cape Town in terms of culture, music, art. It just feels like it has a kind of thing that Cape Town doesn't have. If you speak to like musicians, and we know a couple of musicians like who play live in South Africa, they'll tell you that it's better for them to play in Joburg in terms of culture. They'll tell you, in terms of people, that Joburg is a better place.
I can attest to that, because I've known some musicians that has done that before, and they will tell you that Joburg or Gauteng is good. What I do think what happens in Cape Town a lot is, because we have all these attractions and things, for you to be making money as an artist, I don't think it's feasible to do it in Cape Town, because we've got so much other things to distract us from that vibe. Where in Gauteng on a Monday night is their night for them to go out and enjoy music. Our weekend start on a Wednesday or first Thursday, and then it goes to the Sunday, first Sundays. So we have that.
That's only one Sunday of a month, though.
Exactly. Whereas Johannesburg, I think when it comes to arts and culture, I agree with you. I think they way ahead of us, and somebody might come up and prove me analogy with arts and culture, but I think Cape Town isn't that far behind. And I think maybe sooner rather than later we might be able to catch up.
No, again, and I want to finish this because I want to move on to the next. We might come back. We're gonna probably come back to this topic again another time. But I'm not. This is not to say I don't enjoy Cape Town. I also want to point out that there's a lot of interesting things happening outside that central city limits. The one that gets praised for best city in the world, meaning like this kind of square mile of things that we cannot afford. Actually, 2 quick points. When I was there in December of last year, one thing that struck me also was like how the central part of the city, Sea Point, Greenpoint, Backhoven, Camps Bay, as you keep going, like that stuff is just made for tourists. It's made for international visitors. It's made for rich people in South Africa. We're not necessarily all white anymore. So it's like there's a different city. That best city in the world vibe thing is for those people who can afford, that lifestyle. And then of course there's the other city. And I want to say quickly something about the other city. There's stuff happening in the other city, which I think these surveys don't take into account. Whether even when you were saying Wetton, it doesn't exist anymore. But Wetton used to have a really great jazz club. Unfortunately, Cape Flats, there's really interesting club. There's good club experiences. There's jazz. I know, for example, there's something called Jazz in the Native Yards, which is these people take. It's like a event space that's not in one place, but it keeps moving, and they use like a house or a community center. So those things exist in the townships, in Langa, Googs, in Lansdowne or whatever. In Athlone, they exist. So there's another world that I think sometimes these kind of surveys they don't take into account. So I'm not trying to. I'm not here saying. Of course, I feel like the people of Cape. It's a very beautiful place. I think what happens there is often people get sort of drunk on the beauty of it. And then it's like a drug. You
get lost. You get
lost in it. And then we learn actually that the downtown of this so-called best city in the world is like heavily compromised by extortion and mafia dealings and hitmen. I mean, so that thing of saying safe and walkable, we can debate those things. But let's move on to the next topic. We got to keep moving. The next topic, I mean, that's also been bubbling in the last week or so is the former South African rugby, he was the coach of the Springboks. When was this? Like in the early, was it like
2011? I think he started in 2008, just after the 2007 World Cup. He took over that winning side.
And he's the first black. Was he the first or the second black coach, or if you want to say colored coach of the Springboks?
He was the first. He
was followed by what's that guy from Stormers?
Tuti, Alistair Coetzee.
And interestingly about both of them, and this I'll get to the topic now. Both of them, they have a history of playing in what was known as non-racial rugby, meaning the rugby that was explicitly political under apartheid and against the kind of rugby that was associated with apartheid, i.e. white rugby. So the question, why are we talking about Peter de Villiers? Well, Peter de Villiers, in the last couple of days, he joined the MK Party. For people who don't know South Africa, the MK Party is the party of Jacob Zuma. Zuma, the former president of South Africa who left the ANC to focus. What do you call him? Jacob. So he formed his own political party. And Peter de Villiers, as in the last week, announced that he was joining MK. Peter de Villiers, he wasn't terrible as a coach of the Springboks.
No, he was good.
The first one to win a series in New Zealand, And he beat them in science, right?
And crazy thing is, if we delve a bit deeper at a later stage, he was robbed, knowingly robbed, because the referee in the World Cup was sanctioned. I think he couldn't blow another test match after that. The referee from New Zealand. So it irks me a little bit that he could have been the first black South African coach that could have won the World Cup. I think they had
We'll have to wait for that.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait for that. Maybe after Rassie Erasmus, there will be a surprise, and we'll get a black coach again. But yeah, that's one of the.
You think
that's
Dion?
one of the things. But he won a Lions series, Peter de Villiers. So which is, I think, and he won a famous Test match against New Zealand. If you remember, Ricky January kicking the ball.
Oh, the little and the dive,
that uncoordinated dive that he does there. So yeah, Ricky January.
He gave us good memories. We'll get back.
No. He's a great player. Don't misunderstand. I think.
And I'll say this also:
in France.
People will learn. People are going to learn through this pod. You're a rugby guy, which I'm less of a. I know my rugby. I played rugby in high school, secret. Terrible, actually, as a terrible one to play. But I still played for my school team, but not the first team. But the thing is, you know a lot more about rugby. You follow rugby, so this will emerge as the show kind of grows. But anyway, so what are we talking about? Peter has joined MK, and he had been actually briefly. He was a member of the Good Party, which was a party of Patricia de Lille. She had been a member of the Pan-Africanist Congress and was a trade unionist during apartheid. And after apartheid, she was there. At some point, I think she was the only MP in Parliament. Later, she was in the South African government as a minister. She was also the mayor of Cape Town. She had made various alliances with the Democratic Alliance, who still runs Cape Town. But in any case, she had appointed Peter de Villiers to her party. He had left her party. I think he had a scandal at some point. Sexual harassment, I think it was. But so he now announced that he's joining Zuma's party. And I think for me, the question here is like, in South Africa, is this unusual for an athlete or a coach, particularly I want to say first in sports, and then I want to ask particularly in rugby, to make this kind of, to make public your politics? Is this
affiliation?
From your experience, like what's your feeling on this?
Because I love rugby, I haven't seen this before, and this is why I mentioned to you, and I asked the question when you were here early in January, because it was very strange for me. Although we know now he has a long history with politics in South Africa now, not too long, but he's shown some affiliation at the.
Well, let me just correct you before you go on. He was, as a young person, I don't know, I think he was a teacher. He played scrum half in SARU. Now, what is SARU? I have to just tell people what SARU is. In 1973, SACOS was formed, the South African Council on Sports, to oppose the segregated white sports and to reorganize black people for sports, but also to have an explicit, to while you play sports, you're also committed to call for the end of apartheid. You're allied to the struggle, whether it was black consciousness or the ANC. And in fact, the ANC, I saw a document the other day, 1980, was 81 or 80, they wrote a strategic document where they said, we should use the sports bodies to conscientize people. So Peter de Villiers, it's not that he just joined politics. He had always been around politics. He had been around the liberation struggle like most people were, but he had not explicitly in post-apartheid party politics.
Exactly.
I think he probably had voted ANC before, like most people.
Yeah.
But now he had sort of come clear and said, I'm with Patricia, and now he's with Zuma. So my question is, from your knowledge, and I have some information which I want to talk about in a little minute, but I'm just checking with you. Have you seen anybody in rugby, because you follow rugby closely, Springbok team, professional rugby teams in South Africa, where a player or a coach has explicitly said, this is my politics? Now, I know you're going to say Rassie, and then I want you to tell me, like, what do you mean by that? Or Sia. But, like, have you seen anybody make politics where they've made people uncomfortable?
I would say no. I would say, if any, he's one of the few, because what you normally see around rugby is They're very good businessmen. They've got old boy societies that they can fall back on because of their schooling and those kind of things. So they would rather go into business than go into politics. But I think this would be a sign that this is going to happen more and more often now. And I think the reason why his affiliation is stronger now is because he's not a coach, an active coach anymore. I think once you're an active coach and you have chosen a party, and for whatever reason that party's vision doesn't align with your players, you then cause an internal issue because now there's no common understanding. Do you understand what I'm saying? So for you to affiliate and then say I'm with a party, that is not seen.
I'm gonna be controversial, and I want to hear your reaction to this. I would say if you look at the structure of rugby, I would say if you look at the structure of rugby, so I'm gonna make two quick arguments. One is like the owners, the people who own the franchises, whether they're the Stormers or the Lions or whatever team. They're mostly, I think I was reading earlier today, like whether it's Johan Rupert or some other character, these people are not necessarily, I don't think they're predisposed to support politics, to de-racialize South Africa in terms of like who owns the wealth of South Africa, like de-racializing the neighborhoods, dealing with the inequality, etc. So who owns rugby in South Africa? I don't think they have an incentive for a certain kind of politics. I would secondly argue that the accepted politics is around a kind of Rainbow Nation. Let's have it, let's sing a patch together anthem that includes Nkosi and the stem. Hold up, don't say anything yet. And the players who come through the system, you have gone through these like what were used to be old white schools. That's the path to, I think, professionalism. Yeah. I was reading, who was I reading about last week? And I was like, okay, so this is how you make it. Like you have to get from you get to get picked up by one of the private schools. They're public schools, but they act like privately, like Port Louis or Boland Landbou or something, or Grey. So like you go to those schools. Those schools for me, I don't think they are transformed in their what people call pedagogy. Like what are you learning? I think you're not learning anything critical there about what is South Africa, how South Africa was formed, the violence, the racism. I don't think you get that. So I think the average rugby player, as you said, they're professional. They're just playing rugby. They just want to get contracts. If you're going to be political, you're going to have problems. Now, I will say this, and I'll pause for a minute after this one. A couple of rugby players, I think, have said stuff, but the point is like, how much are they saying or what are they saying? The one time my ears perked up was Lukhanyo Am. Lukhanyo Am said something about how, we've changed. Anybody like me, I can be in the Springbok team, or Sia can be in the Springbok team. But he said you still have to go to certain schools, and he thought that maybe the pathway to get to the teams shouldn't be only through these old white Model C schools. That they could also have people could also come through township schools, and people were a little touched by that. I think Sia Kolisi, I think he came out when Black Lives Matter happened and said, "Oh, I'm supportive of Black Lives Matter." As I understand it, other players like Chili Boy, how do you say his name, Lapele, have said some things now and then, but none of these people have explicitly made sort of criticism about how South Africa works. And to Sia has appeared at a fight of Driekus du Plessis.
With Eben,
No, with Eben, And who's Driekus? Driekus is a guy who has wild theories about white genocide in South Africa. And Sia was like with that guy at a thing. Now, people can also say, but Sia wasn't acting out of character. The whole of South Africa was with Driekus.
Yes.
But my point is just, I think I want to make another point after you've spoken, but I don't think in rugby, we haven't seen somebody, maybe what I'm describing about has been the furthest that somebody has spoken. I have not noticed anybody speaking more than that.
I think, Sean, generally you'll hear any interview with any South African player. I think for the last, I would say 2019, but post 2019, 2020, the narrative is, although we have, and this is a verbatim, although we have our problems in South Africa, we strive to play for our country and to put a smile on their faces, and we know we can do better. So there's a straight PR push for most of them to use this verbiage and to make people understand that they're aware that there's issues, but for them as the South African team, um, they more focus on how to bring the country together, because it does.
Right.
At some stage, you have to understand that it does bring people. Once you start winning, you kind of breed this new culture of. And I always make this analogy. I always say when you go to the rugby field or the soccer field, there's no generational wealth. There's no I live in Camsby, you live in. It is the team we support. For that 45 minutes aside or 40 minutes aside, um, you are now grouped together. When you leave, you go back to your neighborhoods. You go back to where you stay. You go back to whether you're rich or you're poor. But for that limited space of time, you are just another supporter. If your team does badly, you're both upset. If your team does well, you're both dancing and
But are
singing
you
and
going to get
cheering.
mad? But I agree with you. But my point is more about the athletes.
No, I know, I know,
The
I
athletes
know.
all begin to live the same way. They all
Exactly.
have money. They all. I mean,
That's why I
one
said
of
they're
the
going to
things.
business. They're going to
Yeah,
business
like
because
I think what people
the
underestimate
pathway is
is.
there.
Yeah, I think what people underestimate is how these rugby players are all kind of the same. They're becoming the same people. They went to the at this point they probably went to the same school from when they were 6. Because
Yeah,
New South Africa is 30 years old. So chances are their rugby players, black rugby players, went to the same school with their white counterparts. So that old debates about are they good enough, that's not even an issue anymore because they
yeah,
got the same nutrition, the same training, and so on. So my question is like, when they in the team now,
yeah.
do we see them speaking out about inequality? Have you seen? Okay, maybe this is the way to ask it. Have you seen any of these members of the Springbok rugby team say anything about the miners stuck down in the
Not
Northern
at
Province,
all.
and with the government saying we must smoke them out, they're illegals, fill the thing with concrete? Have you seen one, even Sia? Have you seen Sia, who is Mr. Everybody loves Sia. Sia is the head
Yeah.
boy. Have you
I
seen Sia say anything about this?
I personally can't say that I did, but I understand why. I'm saying it's right. I understand why. It's all about this thing of you don't want to ruffle feathers and negative images they want to keep away from the Springbok side. That's how I view it. So I haven't seen him say anything about it. I haven't seen him say their thoughts and prayers go out to the families or the miners themselves. I haven't seen anything like that. But I could be proven wrong. I might have to do some research and find out. But
Has any of them
yeah,
spoken about Palestine?
I, no, I promise you, rugby players at this point in time, I think once you end your career, maybe you'll become more political, maybe you'll make more statements. But I think there's a big push for them to be non-affiliated. They say the generic things on rugby. Yes, we understand our country has problems, but we are the Springboks. All we can do is try and build our country the way we can, by winning and remaining positive. So although there is a clear acknowledgement that everything isn't perfect, they tread very lightly. They don't go deep into that conversation because I don't think they want to, for lack of a better word, they want to piss anybody off. You understand? They don't want to alienate anybody. And for me, I'm a firm believer. You must, if it's right, it's right. And I don't know if they feel it's going to hurt their pockets if they become more vocal. I can't say. I'm not them. I don't understand what their reasoning is or why or they just refuse to give any statements. But I wish I knew. But at this point,
I would give two. Let me give two last bits on this, and then I think we'll end on a lighter note. because people are like, oh, those guys, they are serious, they are fighting. No, we're not. But the topics are serious, they're heavy. Two quick things on just my last two comments on this. One is when there was an attempt to deal with the history and the culture of a sport, cricket had these hearings, and I don't know if you remember, and all it came out about how they treated Paul Adams and how Makaya had to didn't want to be in the bus with people because people were so racist. And the funny thing about that is when that happened, when you spoke out about how the sport was being organized and what had happened, those players got isolated. People ridiculed them and questioned as to whether or not those things happened. And I think the other example is probably the only rugby player for me in the modern history of the game, post-apartheid history, is Ashwin Williams, who on TV, live on TV, was basically challenged these co-commentators. And after that, we never heard, in a country that is majority black, in which the stuff that Ashwin Williams has said, probably most South Africans would agree with, yet he lost his job. So maybe to your point, I think what you're pointing to is in terms of balance, who in terms of the power in rugby, it's still hard to say those things. And Chester Williams, when he was still alive, he was interviewed about the 95 Springbok rugby team and spoke about racism in that team. And again, the kind of reaction to what he said and how people shot him down and said, no, so-and-so, James Small could never have been racist. How can you say that? So it's very hard in South Africa in those kind of forums, even in a majority black country, to say, hey, I have a problem with racism. I have a problem with how this sport perpetuates these inequalities. It's very hard to make your point
especially post 1994. You would think 30 years on, we would be in a better space to be able to talk about these things openly. And I know it's uncomfortable for some, but if you don't talk about these things, if you forget where you come from or what your struggle was, and you don't talk about these things, you could easily slide back into a situation like that. So I don't think you need to be pointing fingers and you are racist. I don't think that is the way to solve anything. But I think a healthy conversation is where you start, and you understand what I'm saying. You listen to somebody, you have a comment, you have a belief structure. This is where you come from. You can listen to someone else. Sometimes people don't know what you're thinking, or they haven't looked at an issue from a different point of view, and it's hard for them to discuss these things. It might be they might be able to discuss it in their own race group and have an understanding of what it is, but they've never spoken to you and try to figure out how you feel about certain things, because we can still say that we are not privileged enough to enjoy all the fruits of South Africa. We're still struggling, basically. We're still struggling. That is what it is. And to see, and yes, we see one or two rugby players, players of color going through, playing well, winning rugby World Cups and those kind of things. So it's looking much better. And even the situation of, and I think we need to touch on this, even the situation of a colored fly-off. Colored fly-offs or black fly-off was not thought about. We've got some good ones in our country right now. The Sharks have a great guy. We've got Mani. We've got all these guys. But Hendrikse from the Sharks as well. So I think the situation.
What's that guy who plays for who's that guy who plays for the Lions? That little guy.
For the Lions. Oh, Nohamba. Sandile Nohamba.
Yeah, incredible. That guy's incredible. Yeah. But I see your point. It's like the way in a majority black country, the way Mani gets treated is an incredible thing. But we'll do that for next time. I want to end on a lighter note, because I know we've heavy topics that we took, but this was good. We did a good job on this first one, but let's not congratulate ourselves yet. So the final thing I was gonna ask about, I was gonna play this. I want to hear, because you live in South Africa and you witness this way more than I do, and you might accuse me of it even. So let's play this whole thing.
You've been there too long for me to accuse you of
okay, so let's play this thing This is a South African comedian who posted this thing on Instagram, so I'm just going to play it.
He's been overseas how many years? He still says Dipopa.
Oh, wait, I got it from the beginning.
Guys, we need to address this thing of fake American accents, and especially like in the Gauteng region. You guys know what like the guys who could speak like, yeah, I'm standing on business, dog. Yeah, man, yeah, you know what it is. Hit me up, dog. And you're like, firstly, I'm not in a passport, so I know you've never been to America. Then on top of that, like, why are you trying to sound American? Like, Tyler's had all the success in the world. Have you guys watched her interviews? She sounds as South African as she was before she left. Benny McCarthy's been overseas how many years? He still says Dipopa South dance. You know what I mean? That guy's lived in Portugal, England. Didn't come back with a twang. You guys haven't even left Johannesburg. But yeah, man. Yeah, man. It is what it is, dog. Like, these new, I'm not standing on business. Stand on proper English and.
Anyway, thoughts?
Yeah, my feelings on that, and some people are gonna hate me for this. Is when I meet someone from the suburbs and they tell me, "Oh, my kid can't speak Afrikaans. My kid can only speak English."
You mean Cape Town suburbs?
You say again?
You mean Cape Town suburbs?
Cape Town suburbs, yeah. So I have a love-hate relationship with accents, because I know rappers like Vernac, and obviously they feel that if they rap in a certain way with American accent, there's maybe more opportunities for them. But yeah, I think keeping your accent local is lekker. I think there's no need to sound like an American in a Cape Town suburb or in Joburg or whatever. I know. Maybe the words that they use, like he says now. What did he say? Standing on business. You can say standing on business, but you don't necessarily have to go with with the accent. You understand what I'm saying? Maybe they feel that because it was said that way. That I know people who will speak to you, to me especially, and call me Rasta for some reason, and then go into a Jamaican accent. But this guy hasn't said anything in a Jamaican accent before he saw me, and then automatically goes into, like he must say, yo, God bless you, my brother, all this. You're like, yo. And then, but I'm going to throw in this one. I actually want to ask you, this is a pet peeve of mine. Why do colored people believe that if they get to a gas station, they have to speak to a Xhosa person in an African accent, but with no Xhosa words? Like,
that's the meaning, yeah. That's
can I get to itinerant in 95?
That's racist.
What?
That's racist.
Bro, that's not on. Like,
that's
you're
like
making it more
like
difficult for them
fake,
to understand you. I think if you're playful with your accent, I can fully understand why people want to sound American. That's up to them. But from my side, bro, I'll leave you with this one. You've been there too long. So I do hear every now and then there's a word coming through.
I sound American.
I think especially when you roll the R's, then you can hear. But other than that, you're still a Cape Town boy, I think.
The best example, and I'll end with this, and then we'll say goodbye, is I was visiting South Africa, and I was going to, I think it's like Greenpoint, Sea Point, and there was a woman. I was walking around there. I was meeting a friend, actually, and a child, and I think I was with one of my kids, with Rosa. I think it was with Rosa. My daughter was now 19, and she was maybe like 7 or something, and I walk up to this woman who sold water out of like a little foxy thing, but it looked like it was like a spaza in a truck, in a van or whatever.
Yeah.
And I said to her, like, can I have 2 waters? And she said, she said something like, that will be 10 rand with a tea. I was like, oh, water. So anyway, I've had my slippages, but I think generally maybe I don't sound like an American. Anyway, this was great. We did a good first one. We're gonna be back again in 2 weeks. We got to get this up. Yeah, excellent work. Thank you, Dave.
If you can, yeah, it was great, man. Appreciate it. We finally got this one under the belt. I would suggest though that
We're not going to end this. Let's end this, and we can talk strategy after we're done. So with that, we say goodbye. We see everybody next time.
Yeah. Cheers, everybody. See you next time.
Excellent.